Hey everyone. Today, we're going to talk about a really interesting time in history that shaped the British Isles. A long time ago, this part of the world faced Viking raids and Norman invasions, but the story starts even earlier with the Romans. When the Romans ruled the Mediterranean, they turned their attention to a big island called Britain. The people there were called Britons, and they were related to the Gauls in mainland Europe. After taking over Gaul, the Romans also conquered Britain and ruled it for over 350 years. During that time, the Romans changed a lot about how the island worked, but eventually, their empire started to fall apart. Germanic tribes threatened Rome itself, so the Romans had to pull their soldiers out of Britain, leaving the Britons to defend themselves. The Britons had grown so used to Roman protection that they didn't know how to fight on their own anymore. When tribes from Ireland and Scotland attacked, the Britons were in big trouble. They were so desperate that they wrote to the Roman commander in Gaul, saying the barbarians were pushing them into the sea, where they would either drown or be killed. Then a new danger appeared: Germanic tribes called the Angles and Saxons. They came in fast ships, raiding the shores much like the Vikings would later on. In 449 AD, the Britons made a big mistake. They invited these warriors to help fight their enemies, promising them rewards. But once the Angles and Saxons arrived, they decided to take the land for themselves. Over time they conquered most of Britain, and the land became known as Angleland or England. The Britons didn't give up easily. In the western part of the island, they kept fighting and held on to their independence. These people became known as the Welsh, which means foreigners in the language of the Angles and Saxons. The Welsh kept their own language, laws, and leaders for many years, while the Angles and Saxons created small kingdoms across England. One day, Pope Gregory noticed some boys from Britain being sold as slaves in Rome. He felt sorry for them and decided to send a monk named Augustine to convert the English to Christianity. Augustine's mission worked, and soon the English became Christians. This helped bring the small kingdoms together under one king. However, peace didn't last. Like the Britons before them, the English became less prepared for war after years of peace. That's when the Vikings, also known as the Northmen, showed up. They attacked, destroying villages and churches. Only the southwestern part of England remained free, and that's where a young king named Alfred stepped up to lead. Alfred, later called Alfred the Truth-Teller, and England's darling, was an amazing leader. Even as a boy, he loved learning. His mother once promised to give a beautifully decorated book to the first of her sons who could learn its songs. Alfred worked hard and won the book, showing the intelligence and determination that would later make him a great king. In the first 7 years of Alfred's reign, he had to constantly fight the Vikings. At one point, he hid in a herdsman's hut on a small island in the middle of swamps. According to a famous story, the herdsman's wife didn't know Alfred was the king and scolded him for letting her cakes burn on the fire. Despite these tough times, Alfred eventually gathered his forces and won a big battle against the Vikings. He made peace with their leader and saved his people. After the fighting was over, Alfred spent the rest of his reign helping his kingdom recover. He focused on improving education and making life better for everyone. Alfred is remembered as one of England's greatest kings because of his wisdom and hard work, which had lasting effects even after his death. And after King Alfred worked so hard to rebuild England, history repeated itself. Strong rulers were followed by weaker ones, and the Northmen saw their chance to strike again. This time, their leader was a man named Canute. Canute, the king of Denmark and Norway, was very different from the wild Viking raiders who had terrorized England in earlier years. By now, the Northmen had converted to Christianity and had adopted more civilized ways of life. Canute was an organized and effective leader, and when he conquered England, he ruled with strength and fairness. For nearly 20 years, Canute brought stability and peace to England. Unlike many foreign conquerors, he earned the respect of the English people, who appreciated his firm but just leadership. Unfortunately, the peace didn't last. After Canute's death, his sons inherited the throne, but they lacked his strength and wisdom. Their reigns were short and marked by instability. With no strong leader to guide them, England began to unravel. Eventually, the throne passed back to the Old English royal family, and Edward the Confessor became king. Edward was a kind and religious man, but he wasn't a strong ruler. Much of his childhood had been spent in Normandy, a region in France where the descendants of the Northmen had become powerful and advanced. Edward admired Norman culture, partly because his mother was Norman. When he became king, he brought many Normans to England and gave them important positions in his court. This caused tension with the English nobles, who resented the growing influence of the Normans. Conflicts broke out, and Edward's reign was marked by unease and division. When Edward died in 1066, he left no children to take the throne. This created a power vacuum, and different leaders began to make their claims. The English nobles chose Harold, a respected and capable leader who had opposed Norman influence, to become their king. Harold's leadership was widely accepted in England, but across the English Channel, trouble was brewing. William, the Duke of Normandy, believed he had a rightful claim to the English throne. According to William, King Edward had promised him the crown during a visit to Normandy. William also claimed that Harold had sworn an oath not to take the throne himself. Using these claims to justify his actions, William began to prepare for an invasion of England. He built a massive army of Normans and Frenchmen, gathering support from across his duchy. Even the Pope blessed his campaign, adding religious authority to his cause. In the autumn of 1066, William's fleet landed on England's southern coast. The English and Norman armies finally met near a hill called Senlac, close to the town of Hastings. This battle would decide the fate of England. The fight was fierce and went on for hours. Harold's army was made up of experienced soldiers, who formed a strong shield wall. This defensive formation was nearly impossible to break, and at first it seemed like the English might win. William faced danger several times during the battle. He lost 3 horses and narrowly avoided injury himself. At one point, a rumor spread that William had been killed, and panic began to spread among his troops. To restore order, William removed his helmet, revealing his face, and shouted, "I'm alive, and with God's help we will win this fight." To break the stalemate, William came up with a clever plan. He ordered some of his soldiers to pretend to retreat. When Harold's men saw the Normans running away, they left their positions to chase them. This broke the English shield wall, leaving them vulnerable. The Normans quickly took advantage of this opening, and the tide of the battle began to turn. But the decisive moment came when William ordered his archers to fire high into the air. One of these arrows struck Harold in the eye, killing him instantly. With their king dead, the English army lost its morale and collapsed. The Normans won the battle, and William emerged victorious. After his victory at Hastings, William moved swiftly to take control of England. He marched to London, where he was crowned king. William the Conqueror, as he came to be known, established a new era in English history. His rule brought major changes to the country, reshaping its culture, language, and governance. Every king or queen who has ruled England since that time has been a descendant of William.